many people still debating about creation and evolution, right? The next slide, please. Is it religion versus science? A lot of people seeing that, like, creation versus evolution is like, it's a religion versus evolution. Because why do you think a lot of people think that way? Where do we learn about evolution? Science class at school, right? Where do we learn about creation? Church, right? That's pretty common. Do you agree with that? The creation versus evolution is a religion versus science. Is that right? No? Okay. Because most of you are here are Christians, right? But if we ask unbelievers, they may say like, yeah, it is right. Why? The same reason. Because they learn creation from the science class. And they learn about creation only from the church, right? Next slide, please. Then what is science? So definition of science is a systemic method of understanding the natural world through observation, experimentation, and evidence-based reasoning. This is the definition. There's some little different definitions in internet and dictionary. This is one thing that I think that most reasonable. Observation. Science is something that you can, right? And experiment. You have to be able to repeatedly experiment, do it and then have the same result, right? But what about the evidence-based reasoning? What does it sound like? It's something that I have a hypothesis, and it's like, I think this is possible, and you find some of the evidence that supports it, and saying that I found this evidence, so this is true, right? So I'm not saying that that's not science. So let me ask you this. What type of science can you think of? Can you just name any type of sciences? Science? Physics? Chemistry? Biology? Psychology? Anything else? The geology? Social science? Right? So therefore, there are different types of science. Formal science, they study logic, mathematics. All right? But we don't usually call that science. Right? But the actual name for those is the formal science. What about, and then those sciences that most of you mentioned, like physics, chemistry, biology, those are natural science, right? And there's some says like social science, psychology, those are social science, right? What are the differences? When we first, previous slides, when we talk about religion versus science, only science that comes in our mind was what? Natural science, physics, chemistry, biology. That's pretty common. I'm not saying that that's wrong. But there are different types of sciences. Like in psychology and social science, can we experiment and then get the same result over and over? No, it's not possible. But we still call it science. Why? Because of the evidence-based reasoning, right? But in natural science, there's also different type of natural sciences. Next slide, please. Okay. There's operational science and origin science. Have you ever heard about that? Never. Why? Because school doesn't teach us that really. But if you look it up, operational science in internet, it will explain to you. And origin science, yeah, it will explain. So let me ask you, this is the picture you see right here. I'm going to ask one. This is a physics question. You see that 4 metal balls, right? Same height and have different slope of ramp, right? When the ball passes the end point, which ball you think will have higher speed? I'm not asking you which one will come down faster. I'm asking you which one will have higher speed when it passes the end point. A, B, C, D. B, C, D. Okay, let's raise your hand if you think that A will be the will have the fast velocity. Okay, Lewis. B. C. Nobody? What's wrong with C? What about D? D? The answer will be all same. I didn't. You know why? Have you ever heard the kinetic energy conservation? Conservation. What the ball has it right now? Potential energy. It's not moving, but it's at certain height. It has a potential energy, right? And when it passes down the end point, it does not have a potential energy anymore because it's at the bottom. But all the energy that had it will change it to what? Kinetic energy, which is velocity, speed. So they started with the same energy. They're supposed to end with the same energy as well, right? These are one of the example of operational science. You can repeatedly doing it, get the same result, and you can prove it that this is right. Do you agree? Yeah, next slide, please. You guys mentioned like chemistry, physics, and biology. If you go to the biology class in college, the first thing that you're going to learn will be the cell theory. Raise your hand if you take the biology class in college. Do you guys remember cell theory? Yeah? So I'm going to read it. All living organisms are composed of cells. That's the starting. And cells are the basic unit of structure and function. All cells come from pre-existing cells. These are the cell theory, right? And I don't want to say 100%, but I would say 99.9% biologists believes this is true. And it is proven. This is one of type of operational science that you can observe and repeatedly you can prove it. Do you agree? Is there anything wrong that you don't agree with this about the cell theory? Any point that you don't agree? The last point, you don't agree with that? Oh, okay. Oh, very good point. But all cells come from pre-existing cells. Okay? That's what we can observe right now. Not only creation that, like, usually when I bring this topic, I try to bring this like cell theory to defend myself to support creation and attack evolution. But Julie just brought up a creation. I was like, oh, but that's true. God created something, but we're going to talk about that a little later. This is an operational science biologist that believes that we can prove. All right? But next slide. These are the examples of origin science. We all know about the Big Bang Theory, right? Right? And evolution is one of the origin science. So Big Bang Theory is the physical theory that describes how the universe expands from an initial state of high density and temperature. Do you know why the science, like, astronomy scientists end up with the Big Bang Theory? We can observe the universe is still expanding. We cannot feel it, but we can observe that it's still expanding. getting bigger and bigger. So they say like, okay, it's keep getting bigger, so it should be started from one point, right? But can you prove that? Do you think the physicians or the scientists who study the Big Bang Theory can prove this? I didn't see any evolution scientists saying that, yeah, I can prove this scientifically. They don't say it. Why? Because they cannot prove it. They believe it. Why? Because they have some evidence-based reasoning. You remember that first slide that I showed you? It's like, hey, I think because of this small factors, or like the things that I can see now, that kind of explains my theory, so I believe this is true. That's how they say it. What about evolution? Evolution is a theory in biology postulating that various types of plants, animals, and other living things. Let me change it. Other living things on Earth have their origin in other pre-existing type of that the distinguishable differences are due to modifications in successive generations. That's kind of, do you understand what they're saying? Yeah, so what they're saying is that they kind of evolve to something else, they believe. Where the evolution believers coming from? Like fossils, and because of this, and then that, and blah, blah, blah. Do you think that there's a evolution scientist saying that oh yeah, I can prove evolution scientifically? Have you ever met anybody like that? Why not? Because they cannot. They think the Earth is how many how old? The age of Earth is how many years? Approximately 4.5 billion years. 4.5, 4.7. It depends. So over 4 billion years. That's what they're saying usually. How they calculate that? Do you know? I'm not sure. Because the half-life of uranium, number 238, yeah, I'm not talking about those details. It's I don't understand fully either. But so there's a certain type of isotope in chemistry. They can see when they decaying. They are decaying at certain speed. So the most common one that they're using for the rock ages is uranium, because after 4.5 billion years, the uranium, half of the uranium that had it from the beginning, will change it to lead. All right? And then when they try to measure the age of the living organism, fossil that was trees or the animal, and then try to measure, they use the carbon-14, the isotope. The carbon, most of the organic material has carbon in it, and most of it has number 12. But number 14 isotope has 2 more neutrons in it. It's a little heavier. And after the living organism die, it starts decaying. And about 5,730 years later, the half of the carbon-14 transferred to nitrogen. So they kind of measure it. And then they say because of this, the carbon, this fossil or this organism has this amount of the carbon-14 isotope right now, that means, it's been 20,000 years ago it died, or it's 10,000 years ago. One limitation about the carbon-14 is that they cannot measure more than 60,000 years. Why? then they're not going to have like carbon-14 anymore, right? What's the limitation of the those radiation dating method? What do you think? You're supposed to know the beginning stage, the ratio of the beginning stage of uranium and lead, or the carbon-14 or carbon-12. Is there a way that do you think we can find that? We don't. We just assume. We say I think because of this reason, there should be 100% of uranium, or this much of uranium should be there. And now we can measure this much. So the oldest rock that we found on Earth has about half of uranium and half of lead. So I believe the Earth is 4.5 billion years. And some the carbon-14 is right now when we see this horse, right? Horse bone, we kind of measure. This is the ratio of the carbon-14 and 12 right now. So when this horse was living, it should have the same ratio of carbon-14 and 12. And now this the bone that we found has only this much of carbon-14. So it should the horse died 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, something like that. But we don't know exact ratio when the living organism was living. Why? Because there's variations a lot. One of them is, you know how the carbon-14 kind of generates in our atmosphere due to the cosmic ray, that's like sunlight. But we have a magnetic field around the Earth that blocks it. And then the magnetic field that we have gets thinner and thinner every year. So we don't know exactly how much of the carbon-14 was there 10,000 years ago. We do not know. And according to the Bible, not only the magnetic field that we had, what did we had around the world before? The water was covering the whole Earth, right? So we don't know how much of the cosmic ray could have went through and then make the carbon-14 back then. So they kind of assumed. All right? So those are the origin science. Big Bang Theory and evolution. Those are origin science. That people say we cannot prove this. All right? So if someone says hey, because of this evidence, evolution is true, then how are you going to respond? Can you prove it? Then they will say, yeah, but nothing's, I can't prove it, but that's reasonable to think that way, they're saying. Remember the cell theory? What was the last part that Julie mentioned? All living cells are coming from pre-existing cells. That's the cell theory, the last part of cell theory. Every biologist believes it. And I told you that that's the first chapter. As far as I know, all the biology college textbook teaches the cell theory in the first chapter. Do you know where the evolution's inside of the same book? Most of the biology books has used the last chapter to explain about the evolution. And I was taking biology class when I was in college, right? I had about 100 students, classmates together. So about a year ago, when we started the biology 101, we started the cell theory. By the time that we were ending the 2 semesters, and we were studying evolution, and evolution scientists saying that we don't know exactly, but somehow, because of some fact, there's all of a sudden, by chance, living organism just started. There's a cell unicell organism just, came. We don't know why. We don't know how. So I was like, I raised my hand and I asked my professor, hey, about a year ago, and like same book, the cell theory, the same author is saying that all living cells supposed to come pre-existing cells, right? But all of a sudden they're saying but the first cell is an exception. Can they prove it? No. And then they put it at the last chapter, so I was like, oh man, they know that it doesn't make sense to each other. It contradicts each other. They know it, that's why they put it the first chapter and the last chapter. If they put the evolution, that second chapter, probably out of 100 students, 80% of students would say hey, wait a second, last week we studied about the cell theory and they said all living cells supposed to come from the pre-existing cells. And then all of a sudden you're saying that the first cells should come from out of nowhere? It doesn't make sense, How can you write a book like that, right? So they put it at the last chapter. So unfortunately, in that class, I was the only one who was asking the question. Right? Because the author knows that they cannot prove it. And they know that it contradicts. So while I was preparing this, these days a lot of students asking questions to where? To who? ChatGPT. So I asked this question to ChatGPT. Why cell theory and evolution contradict each other? You know what the cell theory is? I mean, no, not the cell theory. The ChatGPT answered to me. I said, no, it doesn't contradict each other. Because cell theory is about operational science. Cell theory is only talking about the operational science, this right now. And then evolution is talking about the origin. They are not related to each other. That's what ChatGPT says. Do you think it makes sense? Do you agree? I was like, what? It doesn't make sense at all. The ChatGPT may give you a little different answer, but when I asked a couple of times, it keeps saying that it doesn't contradict each other. But in my common sense, they contradict each other. Even the author knows, I think. That's why they separate it as far as possible. So, when we start this conversation, when we study evolution, we learn those from science class, from school. But our science class never talk about, hey, these are the operation science that we can observe and we can prove it by experiment and repeatedly. And these are origin science, just like social science or the formal science, the different science that we cannot prove it, but because of the evidence-based reasoning, we believe this is what we think that most reasonable way to explain. If they say that way in our science class, I said, I have no problem because I cannot prove creation either. But have you ever seen a science teacher who's saying just as I said? No, they don't say it. They said oh, this is a science, this is a science class, this is biology. It's all together. But if you watch some of the debates, I'm going to mention some of the scientists' names later. One of the debates that I watched it's over 2 hours long, so I'm not going to recommend you guys watching it. But I'm a weirdo who's watching those debates. Who's the most famous evolution scientist in our age right now? I'm not sure. Richard Dawkins. Have you ever heard about his name? Yeah, Richard Dawkins is one of the famous. And one of the famous creation belief scientists, one of them, I'm not saying that he's the only, is the Francis Collins. He was the National Institute of Health, NIH, the director. He's a physician and scientist, researcher. They were debating for 2 hours. I watched it. I listened. And at the end, they know that they cannot prove each other. You're wrong or right. After 2 hours, the most, one of the smartest scientists in our age, debating over hours. And they agreed to disagree. But why? Even those people saying that, yeah, I cannot prove it. They don't even try to say that, I can prove this. They always say, because of this evidence, I think evolution is more reasonable. Because of this reason, I believe the creation is more reasonable. Or intelligent design theory is more reasonable. Have you ever heard about the intelligent design theory? Yeah. When scientists each other, when they're talking about creation and evolution, they talk like that. But just our ordinary people who are not scientists, when we talk about evolution and creation, many of us think that evolution is a science-based and creation is religion-based. That's something that I don't agree. Next slide, please. In evolution, have you ever heard of the macroevolution and microevolution? Is there a person who, this is the first time they heard about the macro and microevolution? Yeah, some of you. Yeah, see, this is very common, macro and microevolution, that besides, below of the evolution, macroevolution is the evolutionary changes that occur above the species level. Right? That's the macroevolution. And microevolution is the evolutionary changes that occur within population or species. Do you see the differences? So macroevolution, what they're talking about is that, there was a reptile, became other species. There's a fish, somehow, we don't know exactly, but by chance, millions of years later, it's starting getting legs or and then became some other species. That's a macroevolution that I don't believe. Microevolution is this. When I eat this certain food over and over, and my gene has a little bit of changes and I got taller or I got fat or bigger, and my descendants, my kids, got a little taller. For example, overall, in Asia, especially Korea, their average height increased over decades. That's a microevolution, right? And then some natural selection, because to catch the fish, I should have little, longer pig might be easier. So those were able to survive better. And then the descendants of the bird who has longer pig survived. And that species had now little bigger pig. That's microevolution. We can observe. And I agree to that. We can, experimentally prove that. So when people talking about the evolution, this is what I say. I agree and I believe that microevolution is scientifically proven, but not macroevolution. Then the person who were trying to persuade me stops right there. Because they know that they cannot prove macroevolution. Next slide. Then what the scientists say? We think that we learned the evolution from the science class, so most of the scientists are supposed to believe evolution is true, right? But that's not true. Richard Dawkins, he's one of the famous evolution believer. Francis Collins that I mentioned, he's a physician, he's a scientist. He believes God. But he believes some part of evolution too. He believes creation and evolution together. I don't know how, but that's what he believes. Charles Towns and Günther Beckley, that's a German, let's just say Gunther Beckley, I was looking up. He recently died by car accident in January 2025. He is a German biologist who believed evolution, and he changed his mind that he now believes, I'm not sure that he's a Christian or not, but he believes the intelligent design theory. So he doesn't believe evolution anymore. And he studied fossils and stuff. And he was the director of one of the German museum. And he changed his theory, and he was start teaching that. So he was kicked out from his position. And Charles Towns is one of the a scientist that believes the evolution is not true. So there's a 4 different group of scientists who believes that they came from one origin, or one ancestor. They believe evolution from the unicell organism. There's a scientist who does not believe God, or who does not believe the creation is possible. There's no intelligent design, but they believe there's a different type of origin. It's not only from one. Okay? 2 evolution believers has 2 different group of scientists. And those who believe creation or intelligent design theory has 2 different. So 4 different group of scientists there are. I don't know, most of them probably, I would say if we calculate the number, maybe in science field, a lot of them believes the evolution, macroevolution and those. But there are a good number of people who still believes the intelligent design theory and God. Even scientists has different faith on evolution. And next slide. Yamanaka Shinya, he is a Nobel Prize laureate. He's a physician, researcher, scientist. He's not Christian. But this is what he said. One of his books is that when I study biology, there are many things that I think couldn't have been made without God. The God maybe he's mentioning is not the God that we believe. But he thinks that there should be somebody who designed this. Without it, I cannot explain. I cannot believe that this is possible. And another, because the theory of evolution has not yet been proven by anyone. And he mentions that. The evolution, he's saying that he's one of the smartest scientists in our era, and saying that the evolution has not been proven by anyone. So, I'm not saying that we have to have debates against evolution and creation or anything like that. I cannot go a little more details, and I do not have much of knowledge. Maybe just a little more than you guys, possibly, and I can answer, or I can give you some evidence that I can support creation. Maybe next time when I have a chance, I'll give you some interesting, some Chinese characters that was created thousands of years ago that matches with Bible. Can you imagine? There are many Chinese characters, Chinese letters that explains Bible. There's there. And there's some other evidence that we can find that this earth is not that old, right? But I don't want to go I want to go those details. But at least when we see or hear somebody saying that, how can you believe creation? That's insane. That's not possible. That's just your faith. That's just your religion. Then I think we should have some way of respond to it reasonably. So next slide. So when I first asked, creation versus evolution, is it religion versus science? No, I don't agree to that. Is it non-science versus science? No, it is not. I think creation versus evolution is the atheism versus theism. Then I'm okay with any type of debate or anything like that. I believe there's a God. And some scientists believe there's an intelligent designer who designed this. Without that, it's not possible to explain. There's some scientists, some people, no, there's no God. So I don't agree to say that there's a God. So if there's no God, but we're still alive, which means we're supposed to come from out of nowhere. And by chance, somehow, it just evolves like that, and we're here now. It's atheism versus theism. So this is one way that I think, one good way to reasonably try to explain to those atheists or evolution believers. But to do that, you need to study yourself a little bit, right? In 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, I'll read this. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. First Peter chapter 3, verse 15. The hope that Peter was mentioning, maybe not about this, but it's one part of it. If we know that creation, if I believe creation, I have a hope that start from the creation and ends, then I should be able to ready to the reason why I believe this. If we do not have an answer, I don't know, the Bible says it, I believe it. No, that's not a good way to answer your faith or your hope to other people. So I really hope that today's message can give you some type of basic idea that you can respond to those who are asking, how can you believe creation, not evolution? Because evolution is scientifically proven, if they say. Then you should be able to respond in some way, in your own way. And if you do not have it, I don't want to blame you, but you need to start making your own answer. And Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4, it says, God chose us even before the creation of this world. I love that verse. Because he said, God chose me even before he created me. God made a plan to die for me even before he created me. I really thank God that he made those plans even before the creation. So, I'm going to end that let's think about when someone is talking about the Bible story or the creation, and when they're talking about the evolution, let's think about what's going to be my answer to them. And in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, it says like, do this with gentleness and respect. I'm bad at that. I like to debate. So I was like, because of this, no, you're wrong, I'm right, No, don't try to approach that way. With gentleness and respect, and try to show them what we believe. And ask them, maybe you believe this, I respect that, right? So let's try to find the best way for each one of us to respond to those questions. And I hope that you guys remember that there's a different type of sciences. And operational science and origin science is totally different one. Okay? All right. Thank you so much.